Hey everyone, welcome back to our Computer Science 2 course. We are studying object-oriented programming using the Java programming language. Today we're going to learn about something really important. We're going to learn about arrays. Now, we're going to just kind of touch on arrays here. There's just so much to talk about that I just want to kind of introduce them because I want to get them in your hands. I want you able to play with them. They're exciting and they're super important. So, in a nutshell, what do arrays do? They solve the problem of having to make a different variable name for every single variable. You may be familiar with lists from prior experience, like with Python. Lists are a little bit more higher level. They're really user friendly. They are super awesome, and we have them in Java as well, and we'll get there. But we need to understand our fundamentals first. And most lists are made with an array, and I want you to know how an array works. So let's talk a little bit about memory in the computer. So if I was to describe the way memory works in a computer, I might describe it as a stick of memory. And this rectangular arrangement of memory, and they are a series of ones and zeros, bits as we call them, short for binary digits. And they describe the information that our programs have. That's what goes in the memory. Now, typically, what we've been doing is we've been assigning variables to specific spots. So, for example, if I say, int x, then I'm creating a specific place in the memory where that variable will be written. And if it's an int is actually 32 bits. And so there'd be a series of 32 little ones and zeros here, depending on what number gets stored there. All right? But that's it. That's the only thing that happens there. Now, when we do more complex items, like maybe when we wrote a song, now that's an object. Now, objects are more complex than the primitive int. And this is an important thing to learn that we haven't talked about. But if I declare a variable like song s, while ints are written directly onto the memory, if I was to make the value 32 for x, the number 32 would go in there directly out of ones and zeros. But when I write an object, that's really complex. Well, we had like length of time of the song, we had methods associated with it, we had the name of the song. So we don't actually write a song directly to the memory. What we write is what's called a reference. And so that specific variable s is pointing to a reference that actually points somewhere else in the memory heap. So it's a little bit confusing. We need to talk a lot more about the architecture of a computer to have that make sense. But for now, just get this idea that primitives are small. They can be written in one tiny little location out of 32 bits. The double is actually 64 bits, so it has to use two of these locations. Whereas an object stores a 32-bit reference, like an address, if you will, to where the computer knows where to go look into a more complicated structure where it has all those different things that it can find. So, the purpose behind all this discussion is I want to talk about arrays. Arrays are also reference types, what we call objects, right? But what they do is they store a location in this memory. So when I create an array, I go somewhere in this memory and I have to give my array a size. So I'll say, like, so if I make my array of size 5, okay? Well, then what it does is it carves out this portion of the memory and makes it devoted to that. So I could have something else over here. I could have, maybe int x, and then maybe over here we got one of these, we got like a double or something. This could be a but this array is carved out and it is reserved just for me. And what that allows me to do is find things in the memory really quickly. So if I ask for the second item in the array, it knows immediately to go to right there. The locations are actually numbered starting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see an array of size 5 actually only has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as its locations. And the reason for that is quite simple, because that's how many places it needs to move over. If I ask for the array, the cell number 3 in array, it means I start it where the 0 is, and I take my size and I use that to figure out exactly where to point. So that would be right here. So arrays allow us to store lots of things in one variable name, and then we just reference them with a number at the end. So if I had an array called array, and I wanted to find this element here that I was just pointing to, I put square brackets around it. Like that. Array bracket 3 is pointing right there. Okay? And that's the basic idea. Now let's see how to use it in our code. All right, so what I want to do is I made a project called Change Counter, and we're going to make something called Change Holder. So it's a class called Change Holder. Capital C, capital H. Always start your classes with a capital starting letter, and don't try and put any spaces. And typically we don't use underscores, so just use camel case in Java. All right, I'll just Control A to highlight and clear all that out. So I have class change holder, and my change holder is going to hold pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, all in one array called coins. And this is the way we do it. We say int open close, because they're going to be a number, so an integer, and we say int open close bracket. That makes this an array. When I put the opening and closing bracket after the variable type, Java automatically knows it's an array. Let's just call it coins. Let's make our constructor. Remember, the constructor is a special method that has the same name as the class. And it's going to take in, and I'll use this underscore, it's going to take in an array of coins. All right? And so coins will be assigned that value there. And we're going to come back and change this. We're going to look at different ways we could do this. And let's write one method. And what I want this method to be is I want it to calculate the amount of money that we have in coins. And so I'm just going to make a comment here so that we know that this is pennies, then nickels, dimes, and then quarters. Okay, we need to remember that because that's going to matter, right? And then, so I'm going to write a method called getTotal that's going to return to me the total amount of money that I have. So we'll return a penny is worth 0.01. So 0.01 times the pennies. Well, the pennies are stored in that first position of our array. So let me just clear all that out. We are actually only using what? Pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. Okay, so I'm still going to use this orange, but I'm going to just, there we go. There, back to normal. Okay, so we're going to be putting in a certain amount. Let's pretend that we had like 7 pennies, 1 nickel, 4 dimes, and 2 quarters. So this here, since we're calling it coins, this is coins bracket 0. That's how we get that value. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say 0.01 times coins bracket 0. I'm going to add to that 0.05 times the number of nickels, which is coins. That's the second one. That's this one here, index 1, okay? So coins bracket 1. Then I'm going to do 0.1 for dimes times coins bracket 2. And then I'll do 0.25 times coins bracket 3. And so now you can see that I'm able to access all these different coins just with this coin, one little coin variable that's an array. Let's try it out. So first we need to instantiate the change holder class. So I right click on it, I'm going to go to new, and well, I don't really like that name. Let's call it change 1. Okay, now how do we type in an array? Well, there's actually lots of different ways to make an array, but the simplest way to do it is with the curly braces that we've been using in our code. So shift open curly brace, and I want you to list, separated by commas, to different values. So let's say we had 12 pennies, 2 nickels, 5 dimes, and 2 quarters. Now, can we figure out how much money that would be? Let's see, 2 quarters, 50 cents. 5 dimes, that's another 50 cents. That's $1. 2 nickels, so $1.10, and then 12 pennies, that'd be $1.22. So we should have $1.22. All right, I'll press OK. So again, did you see how I did that? I put them open, close curly brace with the numbers separated by comma. All right, now we've got our change holder. We can run our method get total, and look at that, $1.22. Pretty cool, huh? Now, depending on what we put in, we might get some unusual numbers, might get like some pretty long decimals, but if we round it to 2 decimal places, which I don't want to go over with you right now, but we will at some point, they would round to the right number. So, pretty cool. It's a useful class too, right? All right, let's talk about some of the negatives about it, though. I had to make an array just to call that function, didn't I? Just to call that method. I think it would be a more useful class if and easier to use. It would be easier on our class users to have a better description of what we want. I mean, how do they know that they're supposed to put in pennies, the number of pennies, the number of nickels, the number of dimes, the number of quarters? How do they know that? Well, so let's change this. Let's say int pennies, int nickels, int dimes, and we can even add in comments, and to our code that would be shown, and we'll talk more about that later. So we could add a comment that says this is the number of them. I could make my variables like this, num of pennies, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say pennies, and I assume they know what it is, and we'll talk more about how to document your code later. All right, so now we have to make the array here. So the way we're going to do that is the same way we just did when we instantiated this class. We're going to list these variables with a comma in between them. Quarts, that's silly. Quarters. All right, so now I've got it like that. Okay, but you're going to see that we have a problem. Okay, the problem here is that it doesn't know that this is an array because it doesn't have the array symbol. So what I need to do is I need to tell it that it's a new int array, like that. So a little bit confusing, but that's the way it has to be. You have to put the word new anytime you're creating an array, not on the same line that you declare it. Okay? So this is called an initializer list, by the way. So we're telling Java that, hey, we're making a new array of ints, and I want it to be with these values. Okay? All right, we'll compile it, and we'll see more of that new operator very soon. All right, now this is makes a little bit more sense to me. I can I can put in any amounts that I want. I don't have to know anything about arrays to be able to use this. Let's see here. 8 quarters is what? $2. So that's 250, 265, 273. I don't know. Doing math in my head. Well, math looks right. Okay, so yeah, that's arrays. Pretty cool little program, I think, right? Let's connect this to what we did last lesson, though. Okay, I want to go back for a minute, and I want to. So that I'm done with this project for a while. I want you to open up the project that we made for our song. Do you remember our song? We had lots of methods. We talked about it. How a DJ might want to have a lots of songs. Well, I think that makes sense for the DJ to have an array of songs they're going to play, right? Let's take a look. So I'm going to call this class DJ. So we've talked about how to make an array of ints. Now we're going to make an array of object types, also called reference types. So you just put the name of the class, song, open close bracket, and I'm going to call it songs. Okay? And we can have the user of our class supply us with the songs that they want. And now we just have right now we would have a nice way of storing those songs. All right? And let's take a look. Let's try it. So I'm going to make a few songs here. This one's going to be 200. The name of the song will be Sister Luck by the Gray Birds. Let's make another song. This song will be called 320, and it's going to be called House of the Setting Sun by the Insects. Alright, I think one more just to get the concept here. I'll call this 212, and we're going to call this, we'll say, OK Computer by Radiohead. I know that's an album, not a song. Please don't destroy me in the comments. But anyway, Radiohead. All right, so I'm going to make an instance of class. So I just put in curly brace here, song 1, song 2, song 3, which are the names of these objects down here. And we should be able to take a look at that. You see we've got our songs, and you'll notice that we can actually look at our array, and it says it's a length 3. So the array actually has a length stored in it, and each one of these is a pointer. We talked about how in the array these values are not written directly in that location. They're pointing to these different songs in the order that I put them in. Okay? And you can see how it points to them and gives me that more interesting music. Okay, let's open up our project again from Change Counter. I do want to make this important point about arrays. We talked about it in our little drawing from earlier. But a primitive array, these values are going to, let's inspect this, these values are going to be written directly in the array. So when I inspect it, you'll notice it just goes straight there, right? But when I inspect this DJ, the array of songs itself is a series of pointers. That's because you can't fit all this information in one little spot. I hope that makes sense. So they have to have these references out to the memory heap. So it's an array. Notice the array itself. The variable for array is a pointer. It points somewhere into the memory heap where it finds that array, and then each one of those spots is pointers. Some not technically pointers, we call them references. Now with the change counter, though, you'll notice a little different here. We have, let me inspect it again. So here's the coins variable is a pointer, or more accurately we call it a reference in Java, to where the array is. The array has a length, which is just how many numbers there are, 4, and then we have the 4 different numbers that we typed in, as opposed to having pointers somewhere else for those numbers. Okay, so we learned how to create arrays, how to use them, and how to access specific values of them by putting the specific spot in the array you want to reference in brackets. I want to point this out that when you want to find, when you make the variable name, you don't put the bracket behind the word, you put it behind the type. But when you reference a specific spot in the array, you put the square bracket and the number after the word. Okay, well, that's it for today's lesson, and I'll see you next time.